Hello, my name is Evany. At Christmas dinner, my mother served steak and desserts to everyone, except me. Then she looked me in the eye and said, I only ordered for family. I walked out. The next morning, I had 83 missed calls, none of them apologies, but that wasn't the worst part. They'd been rewriting me out of my own life for years, erasing me from photos, stealing what I built, and even turning my fiancé against me, all while smiling for the holiday card. Why would a family go so far to erase one of their own? And how far would you go to reclaim your place? Let me tell you what really happened. I arrived 10 minutes early, not because I was excited, just because I needed the few extra moments to get my breath steady in the car before walking through that front door again. The air was sharp for California in December. I had a tray of homemade rosemary rolls still warm, covered in a cloth my late father once used at Sunday dinners. In the other hand, a bottle of red I couldn't pronounce but knew cost more than my mother would have paid. The Carson house sat on a tidy street in Sacramento, lined with white-lit wreaths and plastic Santas leaning against trimmed hedges. My mother's porch glowed golden. She always said lighting mattered. It softened flaws, made people look kinder than they were. The door was slightly ajar when I knocked, then nudged open by the sound of my sister's voice. Come in! Come in! We're in full chaos mode! Callista. She was draped in a cranberry-colored dress that shimmered every time she moved. Evany's here, she announced, like I was the babysitter come to collect a tip. Inside, the warmth was instant. Wood polish, cinnamon-scented candles, baked brie, something citrusy. It smelled like tradition and sugar-coated expectations. I walked in, careful not to bump into anyone with the rolls. A few heads turned. Oh, hi, came from an aunt I hadn't seen since July. No one took the wine. No one said, you look great. They didn't even ask how I'd been, just nods. Callista took the tray of rolls and handed it to someone else without looking. You can set your stuff over there, my mom said, pointing toward the coat rack by the garage door, not even glancing up from adjusting name cards at the dining table. When I finally got the chance to scan the room, I noticed my name tag wasn't on the big table. My stomach twisted. Oh! My cousin Renee piped up, reading my expression. I think you're at the kids' table. I blinked. The kids' table had evolved over the years. It was now a fold-out card table crammed into the corner of the sunroom, complete with plastic cups and booster seats still strapped to two of the chairs. That can't be right, I murmured, mostly to myself. But Vera, my mother, turned, looked at me with that patient smile she used on people she barely tolerated at church, and said, We just didn't want to crowd the main table. You don't mind, right? I didn't answer, just sat down where I was told, near the window, where cold air leaked in through old sealant. Two toddlers fought over a toy next to me. Someone had spilled apple juice. I sipped water from a plastic tumbler and watched them bring out the food. Covered dishes, silver trays, thick platters of meat. Let's all give thanks, Vera called out from her seat at the head. The prayer was long, too long, the kind where your knees stiffen under the table and your wine glass sweats from waiting. Then the lids came off. Steaks, beautifully seared filet mignons, juices running into pools of whipped garlic potatoes. Everyone's plate was pre-plated like a restaurant, except mine. I was handed a smaller dish with dry, reheated chicken and steamed carrots, no steak, no dessert placed beside it. I looked around, hoping it was a mistake. Did someone forget my plate? I asked, voice light, hoping to sound polite. Vera didn't even flinch. Oh, she said sweetly, loud enough for the whole table to hear. I only ordered for family. The silence after that lasted exactly 2 seconds, long enough for me to feel it vibrate in my ears. Then Callista chuckled, a short little exhale like I was being silly. Nobody moved. No one corrected her. No one said, Wait, what? My uncle stabbed a piece of asparagus with too much interest. My aunt sipped from her wine glass like it might reveal the answer to her next move. I pushed my chair back. It scraped loudly. So, I'm not family? Still no one answered. Callista stared at her plate. Vera looked amused. Evany, she said in that rehearsed, social, pleasant tone, let's not make a scene. It's Christmas. I stood up. Not fast, not dramatic, just enough to feel steady. You just told me where I belong, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. And it's clearly not here. I left the plate. I left the wine I brought. I left the tray of rolls. I didn't say goodbye. I walked out through the front door, pulling it shut behind me. Outside, the air felt 10 degrees colder than when I arrived. The porch lights didn't feel warm anymore. They felt like stage lights. My heels clicked against the pavement as I reached my car. Inside, I turned off my phone without checking it. They didn't call my name at dinner. But by morning, I had 83 missed calls. Maybe I was never really supposed to be in the picture. The thought lingered like the faint smell of pine from the scarf that still sat, untouched, on the passenger seat beside me. I stared at it through the windshield, the parking lot of my apartment complex empty except for one flickering street lamp that made the shadows dance around my car. I had turned off the engine 15 minutes ago, but I hadn't moved. My fingers, still resting on the steering wheel, felt stiff, like my body had locked itself into place until my mind caught up with what had just happened. Eventually, I reached for the scarf, cream-colored, faintly fraying at the edges, a snagged thread curling out near the corner. When Vera handed it to me, she said, "Still good. Only used once. Better than nothing, right?" She had smiled like she was doing me a favor. I didn't even open the box at the time. I had just smiled back and whispered a thank you, even though I could already see Callista unwrapping a designer handbag, monogrammed and wrapped with a velvet ribbon. Our cousin Melissa got a custom necklace. Aunt Ruth, a leather-bound journal with her name etched in gold. All hand-picked, all clearly planned. My gift had been stuffed into a leftover gift bag from 2 years ago, the kind Vera kept under the sink, just in case. And somehow, that was supposed to mean something. I finally stepped out of the car, grabbing my purse and the scarf and making my way up the stairs to my unit. The hallway smelled like takeout and cheap disinfectant, a familiar comfort. Inside, I kicked off my shoes, dropped my bag, and placed the scarf on the kitchen counter like it might disintegrate if I handled it too harshly. The apartment was silent. I liked it that way. I poured myself a glass of water, then finally picked up my phone. It had been off since I walked out of the Carson Christmas dinner. Now, as it powered back on, the buzz of life returned. Texts, voicemails, alerts. The number on the screen read, 83 missed calls. Most from my mother, a few from Callista, others from extended family members I hadn't heard from in months. I opened the voicemail tab, listened. "Evany, honey, you really didn't need to leave like that. It's Christmas." Another one. "Your mother didn't mean it the way it sounded. Don't take it so personally." Then came Callista's voice. "Seriously, a whole scene. You could have just talked to Mom privately. Now everyone's upset. Way to ruin the holiday." I closed my eyes. My grip on the phone tightened. No one said sorry. Not one of them admitted what actually happened. To them, I had caused the awkwardness by responding at all. I scrolled through the texts. Most were variations of, "You're overreacting," or, "Let's talk when you calm down." One from Aunt Ruth tried to walk the line. "You know how your mom is. Old-fashioned, stuck in her ways." Old-fashioned. That's what they called it now. Selective cruelty wrapped in tradition. I sank into the couch and opened Instagram. Not because I wanted to scroll, but because I needed to see what narrative was being painted. Sure enough, Callista had posted a carousel of photos. Caption: "Grateful for moments like these. Family is everything." The first photo was a group shot in front of Vera's fireplace, everyone holding wine glasses, smiling. Callista dead center, naturally. The next photo? The steak plates, perfectly seared, artfully arranged. Another of the dessert spread, lemon tarts, tiramisu, chocolate mousse. Then a boomerang of Callista and my cousin clinking glasses. My name wasn't tagged. I wasn't in a single frame. I remembered something else from earlier that night. Right before dinner, Vera had handed me her phone. "You've got a steady hand, sweetie. Capture our moment, will you?" I had nodded, swallowed whatever bitter taste that was rising, and took picture after picture. Smiling faces, inside jokes, laughter that I wasn't part of. I had taken every shot Callista posted. I stared at the last one. A close-up of Callista and Vera, their heads tilted together, captioned, "Strong women raise strong women." I let out a sound, half laugh, half exhale, and tossed my phone onto the couch cushion beside me. That phrase used to mean something to me. Growing up, I'd clung to it whenever Vera dismissed my dreams. When she told me studying finance was too dry for a woman with a soft voice. When she compared me to Callista, always Callista, who had natural charm, who lit up a room. Vera used to say, "Your sister knows how to be seen. You prefer to hide. That's not a bad thing. It's just who you are." But I didn't want to hide. I just didn't want to perform. I picked up my phone again, scrolled back 2 years to another Christmas. There it was, a family photo at the dinner table. I zoomed in, my face, partially blocked by a wine bottle, Callista's hand, perfectly poised, gesturing to her gift. I remembered being there. I brought the pie that year, paid for most of the catering. I also wasn't tagged in that photo. The pattern had been there all along. I just didn't want to see it. A new voicemail buzzed in. From Callista. "Ev, if you want to fix this, just say you're sorry for storming out. Mom's still fuming, but she'll calm down if you apologize. This doesn't need to be a thing. A thing. As if this wasn't years of small cuts, finally bleeding through. I opened my notes app, began typing out a reply, then erased it. There was no reply that could stitch together what they had chosen to tear apart. I stood, walked into the bedroom, and opened the bottom drawer of my nightstand. Inside were receipts, bank transfers, PayPal records, the property deed with my name on it that Callista used in a post once, claiming she bought her first place with hard work and passion. I had let that go. Back then, I thought, family supports family. I thought letting her shine didn't mean I had to dim. Now I saw it clearly. I wasn't supporting her. I was being erased for her benefit. I closed the drawer. No more. They wouldn't get to rewrite me out of the story. They wouldn't get to crop me out of the frame again. When they rewrite you out of the frame, it's time to redraw the whole picture. That line kept replaying in my head as I pulled into the driveway of my mother's house the next afternoon. The same house where she'd hosted Christmas dinners, baby showers, graduation parties, and countless Sunday brunches over the years. The house where family was supposed to feel permanent, familiar. I hadn't planned on going back so soon, not after what happened. But I'd left something behind, 2 boxes of my childhood Christmas ornaments, handmade paper snowflakes from 3rd grade, a tiny ballerina my father gave me the year I quit dance, and an angel I made out of felt and glitter that Vera used to hang near the top of the tree, back when I still had a spot on it. I parked at the curb and sat for a minute, watching the blinds twitch in the front window. They knew I was here. Still, no one came to open the door. I let myself in with the spare key Vera hadn't remembered to ask for back. Inside, the house smelled like citrus cleaner and pine, the kind of clean that felt like an overcorrection, like someone was trying too hard to make the space feel pure. I made my way down the hallway, passing framed photos lining the walls, graduations, weddings, vacations. I scanned each one. Callista was in nearly all of them. Me? Here and there, faded, cropped, absent. Even the ones I remembered being part of. I turned into what used to be my bedroom. The pale blue walls were now painted beige. My books were gone. The corkboard with old postcards and SAT flashcards had been taken down. In its place, plastic tubs stacked waist-high, each labeled with duct tape, XMS decor, linens, MISC, garage. The bed was stripped. My name was nowhere, not on the door, not on the closet, not in the air. I stood there, unmoving, trying to recognize anything that still felt like mine. Just then, I heard heels on the hardwood floor. Vera appeared at the doorway, arms crossed like I'd shown up uninvited to a party. "I wasn't expecting you," she said, without a trace of welcome. "I came to get my ornaments," I replied, keeping my voice even. "You said you'd set them aside." She tilted her head slightly, the way she always did when she wanted to seem patient while judging you. "Oh, those… I think I put them in the garage. We needed the room. You're barely here anymore." "Because every time I am here, I get shoved into a corner. I shot back before I could stop myself. She didn't flinch, just sighed. Ebony, this is my house. I have to keep it functional. I can't leave a shrine to every phase of your life. Don't be so dramatic. Shrine. That word stung more than I expected. This wasn't about nostalgia. It was about erasure. I just want what's mine, I said, turning toward the boxes. Take what you need, she said with a wave of her hand, like I was a stranger asking for a favor. Downstairs, I carried the boxes one at a time through the front hallway. As I passed the living room, something on the mantel caught my eye. A new portrait, framed in gold. Glossy, large. It was a recent family photo, clearly taken this year. Everyone was in it. Vera at the center, Callista to her right, cousins, aunts, even the pastor's wife from church. They were gathered in front of the fireplace, the same one where I used to pose for holiday photos. I moved closer. I was missing. I knew I'd been there that day. I remembered being asked to stand next to Callista. I remembered what I wore, a navy dress, gold earrings. I remembered adjusting the angle of the camera before someone else took the picture. But in the final version, I wasn't just edited out. The entire composition had shifted. People who had stood beside me now overlapped. The lighting on Callista's face was altered, brightened. The caption engraved beneath the frame read, "The Carsons, whole, blessed, loved." My hands began to tremble, not from shock, but from recognition, from finally, fully accepting what I'd been denying for years. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was deliberate. She hadn't just turned my room into storage. She'd turned my presence into a liability. I pulled out my phone, snapped a photo of the portrait. Then I opened the text thread with myself and typed a single line. When they rewrite you out of the frame, it's time to redraw the whole picture. I hit send and stared at the screen until the message disappeared. Behind me, Vera had returned to the hallway. "Something wrong?" she asked, too casually. "No," I said, slipping my phone back into my bag. "Everything's finally clear." I walked past her, out the door, and didn't look back. As I stepped into the cold air, I realized I wasn't angry, not in the explosive way I expected. I was something deeper, sharper, done. I wasn't going to fight for a seat at their table. I was building my own. The words felt heavier once I'd said them aloud to myself. I was still holding the folder when I sat down on the edge of my bed, letting the corners of the manila cover dig into my thighs. I didn't open it right away, just held it, as if that act alone would remind me I wasn't imagining all of it, that there was proof, not just bruised memories. The clock read 7:48 p.m. The sun had long dipped behind the trees lining the street outside my apartment. Streetlights flickered on. A few neighbors were just getting home, their car doors slamming shut, laughter echoing through the walls. For them, life continued. Dinner was being plated. Conversations happened around kitchen islands. For me, I was piecing together all the quiet betrayals that had slowly built this moment. My phone buzzed, a new message from my cousin, Delaney. "Oops, sorry, that wasn't for you." Attached was a screenshot, a thread of messages clearly not meant for my eyes. At the top, a group title, Carson Core. I stared at it, not sure what I was seeing at first. The last message, from Callista, read, "I think the seating plan should keep it intimate, family only." Followed by a thumbs-up reaction from Vera. I didn't need more context. I wasn't just forgotten. I was removed. I replied simply, "There's a group chat?" Delaney answered almost immediately. "Oh, I thought you were added long ago. Weird. I'll ask Mom." There was nothing weird about it. It wasn't a tech glitch. It was curated, like the photo on Vera's mantel, like the dinner seating chart, like every moment that now played back in my head through the lens of design, not accident. The days of giving them the benefit of the doubt were over. I stood up, went to the kitchen, poured a splash of bourbon into a glass, not for the buzz, but because I needed something solid in my hand, something weighty. I opened the folder. Inside were printouts, bank transfers for holiday decorations, catering receipts, screenshots of emails from Vera asking me to quietly cover the cost of the Thanksgiving centerpieces when Callista forgot to bring her card. Invoices for the photo printing at last year's Easter brunch, an event where every guest received a personalized framed photo, each tagged from Callista. I had picked up the order. I had paid the deposit. I wasn't in any of the photos. Then I flipped to the next page, a credit card statement from early November. Leather-bound journals, monogrammed, shipped to my mother's address. 10 total. During the Christmas gift exchange, Vera had unwrapped one, smiled wide, and turned to Callista. "You always pick the most thoughtful gifts," she had said. Everyone clapped. And I had clapped too, because I'd thought maybe, just maybe, they'd correct her in a moment, acknowledge the mix-up. They never did. I had driven home that night wondering if maybe I'd ordered the journals too late. Maybe Vera assumed Callista handled it. But now I knew. It wasn't about confusion. It was about convenience. They gave Callista the credit because she fit the image better. She was the one with the curated life, the captions about sisterhood and legacy. I was the backdrop, the support beam. Silent, sturdy, useful. Until I wasn't. I opened my messages, found Callista's name, typed, "You could have corrected her." It didn't take long for her to respond. It wasn't the right moment, and Mom likes when I shine. That was it. No apology, not even a hint of discomfort. As if I should be proud to play supporting actress in her perfectly filtered drama. I typed again. "I'm not your shadow." But this time, I didn't send it. I closed the thread, took another sip of bourbon, then walked to the hallway closet and pulled out the tote bag I kept for errands. I filled it with the folder, my laptop, and an old portable hard drive. I wasn't going to blow up the group chat. That would be playing their game. I was going to change the rules. Back in my room, I sat at my desk and opened a blank email draft addressed to the whole family. I wrote the subject line, "Let's talk." Then I stopped, stared at the screen. My fingers hovered over the keys. I thought about the photos, the way Vera smiled without flinching when I stood to leave the dinner table, the way Callista's eyes flicked away like I was an inconvenience. I thought about every time they used my money, my time, my silence, and handed the credit to someone else like it was candy. What could I possibly say in an email that would unbend the years? I hit delete. I didn't need their audience anymore. I opened a new folder on my desktop and titled it Plan B. Then I created subfolders: receipts, photos, messages. I dragged the files from my hard drive over, organizing each one. It was meticulous, methodical, the kind of work I used to enjoy doing when I helped small businesses audit their operations. Only this time, I was auditing my life. By the time I finished, it was past midnight. My phone sat screen down on the desk, silent for once. I didn't care who was messaging me anymore. I didn't care who wanted to explain, who wanted to patch it over. I pulled out my notepad, jotted one last thought. They didn't just silence me, they replaced me. But I was done being erased. If they wanted a battle, I'd bring the truth, with paperwork. I didn't sleep much the night I hit send on that message. Not because I was second-guessing myself. I wasn't. I'd already spent years doing that. The insomnia came from something else entirely. The quiet knowledge that I had finally crossed the line they never thought I'd dare approach. Not just calling out their behavior, but backing it with facts, with signatures, with digital trails they couldn't explain away with a well-timed laugh or a comment like, "Oh, it's just Ebony being sensitive." 3 days after Christmas, I walked into the law office of Frank Ortega, the family attorney. I'd made the appointment under the guise of wanting to request copies of my late father's archived financials for estate memory purposes, a phrase that sounded polite enough to avoid suspicion. Frank had known our family for decades. He officiated property deals, settled wills, managed trusts. A quiet man with a trimmed mustache and the kind of voice that made people lower theirs to match. He greeted me with a handshake that was firm but wary. "Ebony, I wasn't expecting to see you this week. Everything all right?" "I just have a few questions," I said, offering him a practiced smile. He led me to a conference room, gestured toward the seat across from his. "Coffee?" "No, thank you." I opened the folder I brought and laid it on the table between us. I wanted to revisit the will my father signed before he passed. The one that included the Sacramento house. Frank blinked, then opened a drawer and pulled out a thick file, flipping it open. Sure, we have two versions on file, one from 6 months before his passing and one dated 3 weeks prior. That alone made my heart skip. Two? I asked. He nodded. Yes, the first version named you as the sole inheritor of the house. The second assigned it to your mother and Callista jointly. I leaned in. Do you still have the original signature pages? He slid the documents toward me. The first looked familiar. My father's clean, steady signature right where I remembered it. The second, well, it looked like his name had been traced. Not forged, not sloppily done, but not organic either. The slant was different, the pressure too even, like someone had been trying too hard. Was this second version notarized? I asked. Frank hesitated. Vera brought it in after his passing. Said your father had asked not to burden you with more responsibilities. Of course she did. I stared at the second signature for a long moment, then reached into my bag, pulled out a copy of my father's signed loan from 5 years earlier, and laid it beside the will. The differences were obvious. Frank noticed too. You think it's forged? I think it deserves a second look, I said. By a handwriting analyst, independently. He didn't argue, just nodded slowly. I'll start the process. I thanked him and left, my pulse high but steady. Outside, the sun glared off my windshield as I sat in the parking lot, processing what I had just confirmed. She didn't just push me out of the room, she stole the room. Later that evening, back at my apartment, I scrolled through Callista's Instagram. She had posted a new reel, her in front of the downtown condo I bought 2 years ago, posing in the entryway, holding a coffee mug with Boss Babe scrawled in gold lettering. Caption: Home is where you build your empire. My chest tightened. Flashback: heavy rains had flooded the lower level of our old family house. Vera panicked. Callista claimed she couldn't possibly handle 2 kids and a dog in that chaos. I had just gotten a bonus and had good credit, so I offered a solution, put a down payment on a modest 2-bedroom condo, and let them live there rent-free while the main house was repaired. The deed was in my name. The payments came from my account. And now? Callista had turned it into a photoshoot prop, a badge of fabricated independence, all while smiling like she'd built it from the ground up. Some people steal attention, others steal homes. I opened my laptop and drafted an email attaching all the relevant documents, property title, bank transfers, receipts for the down payment. Then I attached screenshots from her posts, including the one where she claimed she worked 3 jobs to make this happen. To Vera Carson, Callista Carson. Subject: Legal Notice of Property Misrepresentation, Estate. Interference message. As of this date, I am formally requesting the correction of 2 documented falsehoods. The misattribution of the downtown Sacramento property, currently titled under my name and publicly claimed as Callista's residence and asset. The alteration of my late father's will without verified notarization, signature verification, or proper legal counsel. You have 1 week to respond with written acknowledgement, correction of public misstatements, and an agreement to reassign public credit and financial responsibility as per legal documentation. Failing that, I will proceed with legal recourse, including public filings and property reclaiming through civil action. Consider this your opportunity to resolve matters privately. Ebony Carson, owner. I hovered for half a second, then hit send. 10 minutes later, I received Vera's reply. Subject: legal notice. You're making a mistake, Ebony. No emotion, no attempt to explain. Just that short, stiff sentence. I wrote back, simply, not this time. Then I closed my laptop and let the silence settle. It didn't feel heavy like before. It felt earned. I stood up, crossed the room, and opened the window. Cold air poured in, but I welcomed it. I'd been breathing stale air too long, air that smelled like secrets, like baked ham and condescension. This was the scent of something real. They wanted silence. I gave them receipts. Now the noise is coming from the outside. It started with a knock, not a text, not a call. An actual knock at my apartment door around 9:30 the next morning. One of those polite, 2-tap sounds that felt out of place in my complex. I wasn't expecting anyone. My grocery order wasn't due for hours, and I wasn't exactly fielding visits from friends these days. Still in my robe, I peered through the peephole. Callista, holding a tray of pastries. Of course. I opened the door just wide enough to keep her standing on the threshold. "Morning," she said, wearing a tight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I thought we could talk. Mom's putting together a little lunch. You know, try to clear the air." I glanced down at the tray. Croissants, some kind of jam tart, all neatly arranged. "Did you bake those?" She tilted her head. "They're from that place on 18th, the one with the marble counters. You like those?" I didn't reply. She cleared her throat. "Evany, come on, you made your point. Can we be adults about this?" I stepped aside just enough for her to come in, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to finish what I started. "Let me get dressed," I said. "Give me 10. 15 minutes later, we were walking up the Carson driveway. The sun was bright, but did nothing to cut the tension between us. Vera's SUV was already parked in its usual spot. Callista carried the pastry tray like it was a peace offering, and I carried a plain brown folder with 3 rubber bands holding it closed. Inside, the table was already set, glassware glinting, napkins folded like tiny fans. Vera stood at the far end, arranging a cheese board like she was preparing for a photo shoot. 2 aunts and a cousin were seated already, chatting about sales at Macy's and someone's new car. When they saw me, they got quiet. I took the seat at the end of the table, by choice this time. The pastries were placed in the center. Vera didn't greet me, just looked up, then went back to the brie. Callista cleared her throat. "We're glad you came." I placed the folder on the table and undid the bands. "I didn't come to hug it out." Vera looked up. "Evany, whatever this is—" "No," I said, flat and final. "Whatever this is, it's a ledger." The table stilled. I opened the folder, spread the first set of papers, bank transfers, monthly summaries from the last 6 years. "This," I said, tapping the stack, "is every payment I've made on behalf of this family. The property taxes on this house, the monthly utilities, repairs, mortgage supplement when the interest rates jumped, the down payment on Callista's condo." Vera's face remained composed, but her hand faltered slightly over a wedge of cheese. "And this," I continued, pulling out another sheaf, "is a record of the holiday expenses I've covered. Catering, decorations, the framed photos. You remember the anniversary dinner for Uncle Joe? That was me too." Callista opened her mouth. "Evany, you never said—" "Because I was raised to believe family does things quietly, because I thought love meant giving, not keeping score. But when you let people forget, they start acting like it was always theirs to begin with." I slid a final page across the table. "Starting today, I'm not paying another cent to anyone here. You can explain it to the mortgage company yourselves." Vera stood up sharply. "You're being dramatic. This is family." I looked straight at her. "Family doesn't steal, and they don't lie about who paid the bills." She tried to speak again, but I cut her off. "You used my name when it was convenient, and scrubbed it when it wasn't. I watched you give Callista credit for everything I did because her smile fit better in your photo frames." A ripple of discomfort spread through the table. One of my cousins shifted in his chair. Another looked down at her lap, but no one interrupted. I softened my tone, not because I was backing down, but because truth has more weight when it's quiet. "I spent 6 years working 2 jobs so this family could keep the lights on. You spent it pretending Callista was the one holding it together." Vera's jaw tightened. She was a woman used to control. Image was her currency, public perception was her religion, and I'd just exposed the temple. There was a pause, a thick, unmoving silence that filled the room. I didn't need them to say anything. I didn't need tears or apologies. The documents were my voice now. Without another word, I stood, gathered the papers back into the folder, and walked out. Callista followed me to the porch. "You could have warned me," she hissed, gripping the edge of her jacket. "You just blindsided everyone." I turned to face her. "You had a decade's worth of chances, to be honest. I gave you space. You used it to rewrite the truth." She looked down, chewing on her bottom lip. Back at my apartment that night, I lit a candle and sank into the couch. The folder was on the coffee table, unopened. I didn't need to reread it. I knew what was in it and what it meant. Around 10:45, my phone rang, unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, but curiosity pulled me back. I hit play. "Hi, this is Amy Brandt with the Sacramento Sentinel. We received a tip about internal legal conflicts in a local family estate involving misrepresentation of assets. I'd like to speak with you, if you're willing." I stared at the screen. They wanted silence. I gave them receipts. Now the noise is coming from the outside. You can't shame a woman who's already walked through the fire, barefoot. That thought stayed with me long after I ended the call with the reporter. I wasn't surprised someone had tipped them off. I was only surprised it had taken this long. The next morning, I woke early, poured myself coffee in silence, and sat by the window as the city began to stir. A few joggers passed below, bundled in layers, their breath visible in the crisp air. The world looked ordinary, but inside me, something had shifted. Something was settled now. I wasn't flinching anymore. At 9:12 a.m., my phone buzzed with a message from Layla, an old friend from grad school who still lived in San Diego. I hadn't spoken to her in months. The message was short. "Ev, is this real?" Attached was a screenshot, an old group chat. The sender was a mutual friend we both used to know from college. The image was clear, a thread titled Family Fix. The participants, Vera and Callista, and me as the subject line. I opened the image. There it was, dated a year and a half ago. Callista: "She's moving way too fast with him." Vera: "She'll ruin it like she always does." Callista: "Let's remind him who the real woman is in this family." A few hearts, a thumbs up. Then a photo of my ex-fiancé, Brad, sitting with Callista at a restaurant, taken from across the room, clearly without his knowledge. The caption: Phase 1. The blood drained from my face. I scrolled back through my mind. That year, I'd started dating Brad seriously. I was considering moving in with him. And then, out of nowhere, he'd ghosted me for 3 weeks before sending a breakup text saying he wasn't ready and that things had moved too quickly. 2 months later, I saw him in a holiday post on Callista's feed. She'd written, "Reconnecting with good people. Timing is everything." It hadn't made sense then. Now it did. They hadn't just sabotaged my finances, they had sabotaged my relationships. I sat back on the couch, the image burning a hole in my memory. All this time, I had questioned myself. I'd blamed my pace, my vulnerability, my need to feel chosen. They had orchestrated it. Later that afternoon, Jordan, my boyfriend of the last 7 months, walked into my apartment holding his phone. "Hey," he said, frowning. "This is weird." He handed me the screen, a message from an unknown contact. "Be careful, she ruins men and families. Ask her what really happened last year. She's not who she pretends to be." There was no name, just the message. I looked at Jordan, unsure how to respond. He watched me, searching my face. "You have any idea who sent this?" "Yes," I said. "And I'm not surprised." He sat down slowly. "Is this about your family?" I nodded. "They're spiraling. They're losing control, so now they're coming after what matters to me." Jordan stared at the message again. "Why would they think I'd believe this?" "Because for years I did," I said quietly. "They counted on me doubting myself. They hoped you would too." He didn't speak, just looked at me, waiting. So I told him everything. The revised will, the stolen condo, the payment records, the public exposure, the article brewing. And now, the proof that they had manipulated my past and were trying to dismantle my present. When I was done, he exhaled slowly. "You know what's crazy?" "What?" "I still want to be here." I blinked. Jordan leaned forward. "But I also know this is your storm, and I don't want to make it worse. So if you need space or time—" "No," I said. "I need you to stay. Just don't let their noise drown out my voice." "I won't," he said. "But if they come for me again, I'll handle it." That night, I opened my laptop, pulled up a blank document, and started drafting a timeline. Dates, events, screenshots, bank records, quotes, photographic evidence. I wasn't creating a social post. I was building a statement, not one for public spectacle, but one that would make it impossible for them to spin the story into anything but what it was. By midnight, I had organized everything into a locked drive. I emailed copies to my lawyer and to the reporter, Amy Brandt. I scheduled a meeting with a community advisor who specialized in family dispute mediation and legal protection services for women in high-profile conflicts. Then I contacted a therapist, a woman who ran a small practice helping adults navigate post-narcissistic abuse family dynamics. Her name was Darlene. She answered kindly. We booked an appointment for the following week. I didn't cry. I didn't vent. I acted. If they wanted to play war, they'd better come with more than whispers, because I wasn't afraid of them anymore. I wasn't afraid of losing them. They were never mine to begin with. At 2:07 a.m., my phone buzzed again. This time, it was my lawyer. The reporter's digging deeper. Wants to run this nationally. You ready? I typed one word. Yes. For the first time, I didn't look back. I looked forward. That Sunday morning, the parking lot at the community center was fuller than I expected. Minivans and sedans lined every space, and people were already gathering near the double-glass doors with cups of coffee and platters of food. Someone had brought a sound system. Someone else had brought flowers. This was supposed to be a brunch, a warm, familiar Carson gathering Vera had rebranded as a New Year's renewal. The invitation had gone out 2 days prior. Hand-picked recipients. Family only, it said. I wasn't one of them, but I showed up anyway. I walked across the asphalt in a navy coat, my heels clicking steadily. In my bag was a USB drive. In my hands, a leather folder stuffed with neatly tabbed documentation. I had triple-checked it the night before, printed everything twice. I didn't come for chaos. I came for clarity. Inside the hall, the usual decorative flair was on full display. White tablecloths, fresh eucalyptus, pastel centerpieces, printed name cards. I could smell cinnamon and clove and some kind of honey-glazed ham. It almost distracted from the looks I received as soon as I walked in. Callista was the first to spot me. She froze mid-sentence, her mimosa half-raised, then quickly turned to whisper something to Vera. My mother looked up from the far table, eyes narrowing, but she didn't move. I made my way toward the front of the room, calmly, intentionally. Some relatives smiled hesitantly. Some avoided my gaze. Others looked confused, probably wondering what I was doing here after everything that had gone down. I stood behind the podium where someone had set out a welcome note, slid it aside, and placed my folder down. I know I wasn't invited, I began. But I figured since we're all here for truth and renewal, I'd contribute something honest. The room fell still. Forks clinked against plates. A few kids stopped fidgeting. Since you've only heard one side of the story, I said, opening the folder, let me share what your holiday table was actually built on. I pulled out the documents, one by one, receipts for down payments on the Carson house, monthly financial supplements, medical bills I covered when Vera had outpatient surgery but didn't want the church to know, loans for Callista's so-called business startup, property deeds with my name as owner, screenshots of text threads, emails, timeline summaries. I laid it all out. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just read. At some point, my Aunt Sheila started weeping softly. Uncle Ben leaned forward, looking at one of the statements as if seeing it for the first time. My cousin Devin, Vera's favorite nephew, stood with his arms folded, nodding slowly. No one interrupted me. When I finished, I took a step back. You don't have to like me. You don't even have to believe me. But this is what kept your lights on. This is what funded your photos, your cakes, your Christmas miracles. Callista stood abruptly, her voice sharp, shaking. You're ruining everything. Before anyone could respond, the event organizer, someone from the local nonprofit Vera volunteered with, walked up quietly and said, I think it's best if you step outside for a bit, Callista. This was supposed to be about family healing. Callista blinked, stunned. You're kidding. The woman shook her head gently. There's a process for this, and it's not name-calling. Callista's face flushed red. She gathered her purse and stormed out, heels hitting the tile like nails being driven into a coffin. I watched her go. I felt no joy in it, no vindication, just exhale. Then came Vera. She didn't yell. She didn't protest. She stood slowly, adjusted the collar of her blouse, and looked me dead in the eyes. "You'll regret this, Evany," she said, her voice low and controlled. I held her stare. "I've regretted every year I stayed silent." She didn't reply. She just walked to the back of the room, took her coat, and left through the side door. That evening, I heard from Aunt Sheila. She told me that after I left, several relatives called for a private vote. Vera was asked to step down from the committee she chaired at the local church. For the good of the community, they'd said. Callista lost 2 major sponsorships by Monday morning. A statement was posted by one of the brands saying they no longer aligned with her personal values. Another quietly pulled her from their upcoming event. Back at my apartment, I made tea and sat at the kitchen counter. The lights dimmed, phone turned face down. A new message came in. This one from my lawyer. "Everything is in motion. Are you ready for the next chapter?" I didn't hesitate this time. I wrote back, "Let's begin." For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I needed to explain anything, or justify my presence in a room, or tiptoe around feelings that never tiptoed around mine. I didn't carry shame. I carried proof and peace. The next morning, sunlight filtered through my new office window, casting a soft golden hue on the empty walls. I had unpacked only what mattered. No family portraits, no legacy heirlooms. Just a framed quote I had printed myself in bold serif font, mounted clean and clear above my desk. Be the woman who outgrew the silence. It was quiet in this new town. Not the kind of quiet that feels empty, but the kind that gives you space to exhale. I had moved 2.5 weeks ago, 3 hours south of Sacramento, to a smaller town with wide sidewalks and neighbors who made eye contact when they said good morning. The air was gentler here, the pace slower. I rented a modest 2-bedroom near the community college and turned the second room into my home office. No more cold tile floors or echoing voices down long halls. Just my space. I now worked part-time as a financial advisor at a nonprofit that helped single mothers rebuild their lives, most of them survivors of divorce, debt, or displacement. Women who had been pushed to the edge of invisibility but were clawing their way back towards stability. Every time I sat across from one of them, reviewing budgets, untangling credit statements, or simply listening to their stories, I saw slivers of myself. I didn't share everything, not the specifics. But when they asked how I knew where to look in the numbers, or how to read between the lines of financial control and emotional manipulation, I'd say, experience teaches you how to spot things most people miss. That afternoon, after wrapping up a session with a young mom trying to escape a co-signed lease with her ex, I walked 2 blocks down to a quiet cafe. It was becoming my new spot. I ordered a chai latte, settled into a seat near the window, and pulled out my laptop. As it powered up, I checked the draft folder in my email. It was still there. Unsent, Mom. I clicked it open. The message read, "Mom, I wanted you to know I forgive you, but not because you asked for it, and not because I think you deserve it. I forgive you because I refuse to carry what you left me with." I read it through again, then hovered over the send button and closed it. Some things don't need to be said to bring peace. I moved the message into a folder I had labeled Unsaid. Unneeded. It sat beside other drafts, one to Callista, one to Brad, one to my younger self. None of them sent, all of them necessary in their own way. A bell jingled at the door. A little girl walked in with her mother, giggling, her hair bouncing as she skipped toward the counter. I watched them for a moment, a soft smile settling on my face. At work last week, one of the newer women I'd been mentoring had asked, "How did you survive everything?" I'd paused, caught off guard, not by the question, but by how simple the answer had become. "I stopped needing their seat at the table," I told her. "I built my own house." And I had. Vera no longer showed up in community events. Rumor was she'd stepped down from the church board, citing family matters. Some said she wasn't well. Others whispered about how quiet her house had become. Callista's influencer profile had gone silent. Her last post was a black and white quote image, taking a break to reflect and grow. The comments were limited, the hashtags gone, the glitz stripped bare. No apologies ever came. But I didn't need them. The absence, once so loud, now felt like space, like peace. It wasn't vindication I'd wanted, it was freedom. And that came not from revenge, but from release. I closed my laptop and cradled the warm cup in my hands. Outside, the little girl ran back to her mother, clutching a cookie the size of her face. They laughed as they walked past my window, their joy simple and untouched. I whispered, more to myself than anyone, "I'm not angry anymore," then added, "But I remember." And that's how healing begins. Not when they change, but when you choose yourself. Sometimes, the hardest truth to accept is that not all families are built on love, and not all silence is peace. Ebony's story reminds us that healing doesn't always come with apologies. Sometimes, it begins the moment we stop waiting for permission to choose ourselves. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you once called family? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more real, emotional family stories just like this one.